following a river for tens of kilometers without actually being forced by nature to leave it is really difficult. Hello and welcome back, fantasy cartographers. In this video I'm gonna cover adding labels and roadstar maps, and actually I already covered it and had like hours of work and some speedrun for you, but unfortunately I lost it and I'm gonna now reshoot this. But I don't want to just make all the maps and roads again because it takes hours. So I'm just gonna keep it straight this time, go and talk about what to do, what not to do, some tips and tricks that I can share. So starting with labels, what I recommend and why I'm putting these two together is because these are some of the final steps and they are affecting each other. For example, because I did the labels first, and not to make the labels unclear, I finished my paths where the labels start, because at this point it is already obvious that this path is leading to this place. What I would say is, if you will need non-labeled version of your maps, do the path first or do a revision on the paths. So this is one thing to clear. And now we can talk more about labels. As you can see, there are different types of fonts and different sizes of text and different colors of text. Just as I told before, I'm using these together to, in a way, categorize the labels depending on what kind of place they are naming. For example, if it is a settlement, I have this specific font, the color, and a bigger size of my font and a smaller size of my font depending on the size of the place. So as an example here, all my towns have 20 font size, but all my capitals have 24. And this helps the viewer to understand, even when you look at it from afar, it helps the viewer to understand that some parts have more importance or they are more major. Another thing I do is I change the font colors sometimes. For example, for all the forest, as you can see, I have this more yellowish, paperish color, which helps me to balance the whites on the map, because if I had all my fonts white, it would be too much white. And here I have another one. This is the same font with the forest, but this time it doesn't have any color. It's just black. Then the overall coloring is not going to be too much on the fonts, because if everything is colored, then it will also be a distracting point. So this all goes to say, your font choices, your color choices, and size choices should try to balance readability and aesthetics together. And one more thing, for here on the mountains, it is bigger than the previous ones, wider than the previous ones, but it is black and just surrounded with brown to make it more readable, so that it doesn't take all the attention and doesn't overcrowd the map. So I apply these understandings all over the map. It's like, for example, here, you can also do things like this. All my forest names are on top of the forest, right? But this one is not, because why? It would overlap with this one. But because I already categorized the fonts in a way that is consistent, you would immediately understand that this font, this text, this name is for the forest. So you just need to spend a little time around the map and you will see the consistency, and automatically you get it. And now that we covered these, I can also talk a bit about how many things to label. How do we understand? Try to balance readability and practicality. For example, if I don't really need to know what this tiny bit of woods that are dried anymore called, I wouldn't name it. If I don't need to know the names of the forests, then just keep them not labeled. If I only have a very important major forest and the rest of the map has smaller forests and woods, then maybe you could just label the bigger. Because if you will not use that information in your plots, in your world, in your games, then do you really need to show it? I labeled as much as possible here so that I could show you what we could achieve with different types of combinations of fonts and colors and sizes. But when you are doing your works, you don't really have to label this much, or you could label even more if you need, or if you want to go like those old school maps from the medieval times where sometimes even all the coastline is just full of names and towns and villages. They literally show everything, even if it's a small dot, and they have a name for it, and it goes, oh my god. So if you want to go for that, it's fine, perfectly fine, as long as it is fitting the theme and the feeling of your world. That's a choice. But if you want to go with a bit more classic approach to fantasy maps, then I would say try to balance the readability and requirements in an aesthetical, as much aesthetical way as possible. If you have never mentioned the name of something, and it is not a major thing like the names of the oceans, then don't do it. Another tip I can give is to observe as many maps as possible. Just go around, check your favorite fantasy maps or amateur fantasy maps, see how people label it, what kind of styles they use. I also really like dark brown fonts, especially if it is on the banners. My map overall has labels directly on the map, except for the capitals. You can also change this approach, keeping the core of it. Maybe all your settlements could have it, but not the natural things. Or maybe only your map title could have the banner, etc. So you could also categorize using the banners in a way that would help you to make sure that the map is not overcrowded with banners. Because in my opinion, naming everything with banners takes too much space in the map, and it makes you lose the details. For example, if I were to have banner here as well, what happened to this lake? That was in between Glank and Muflak. My party follows through the river, up the hill, and in one day reaches Glank. But during the explanation and description of this journey, I mentioned that they were fishing in a lake. Now I lost that lake. And this is just one example. There could be many more details that you lose. Maybe you will tell them like, oh my god, you're so fucking detail oriented or perfectionist. You don't need to be like that. That's true. If you don't mind, then go for it. But if you mind, then I would recommend to use the banners only for the major things like cities or capitals and the titles. If in your style the fonts are always small, then you could also have banners for more things, because then you have more flexibility there due to the size of your fonts being very small. So that's another thing to cover. And yeah, the thing is, now that we labeled the map, the paths, just like I was explaining in the beginning, you could just avoid overlapping with the fonts so they will be as readable as possible. And this will help you to make sure that your fonts are a little bit more readable. For example, if I were to have a road going through here, and what if I were to use this type of road because I need that road specifically, or let's say it's a train road, so I need to use this one. Like suddenly it makes it much less clean. And little details like this, maybe you don't notice if it is only one, but if it is all around the map, then it really reduces the quality, in my opinion. So therefore, I would say add the paths after the labels if you don't need a labelless version. And if you need, you can still do it like that, but then you would need to make a revision. So that is also covered. And for the paths, what I could say, I would preferably start adding the paths also starting from the capitals. Why? Because, you know, generally the roads need to lead to capitals. So I would try to make sure that there are as many roads to capitals as possible, as long as it is not in a situation like this, because you can't really probably go through the mountains. But if it is like here, for example, I'm trying to have it both ways. Here I have, as you can see, another option instead of just being on the right. What we could do, we could also do, let's do it together, something like this. Like I do roads that are not fully shown and hidden, but your eye automatically finishes it for you, because it's already obvious that this road is going through there. So I would recommend this because capitals are very important, and people for many reasons need to go to other places as quickly as possible, and on different seasons or in different situations like war and etc. So I would say try to see how many roads you can take from different places to your capitals and your main cities. So for example, for that you could improve this. I don't know, how did I miss this one, because this also needs to connect. And sometimes make exceptions and leave some parts with less paths. Yes, I think this would be my best advice to you about making the roads, which is the development of the country. The more the country is developed, generally the more roads they have and the better quality roads they have, and the more they can fight against natural difficulties. What do I mean by this? Even in the modern ages now, when you go to a developed country, there are more highways, and the highways go through tunnels and bridges and everything to make it as straight as possible and as fast as possible. But if you go to a very undeveloped country, you will find yourself going all around the mountains instead of going right through it. Because why? For those countries, it is very difficult to make tunnels economically and technologically. So the same thing applies to these kingdoms, or if you want to do it in other areas, doesn't matter. It always applies. So what you could do is, if one country is very developed, the capitals and the cities could have more roads going here and there. There could be more alternative roads as well. In a very undeveloped country, maybe it's just like one road for each city and towns, and everybody has to follow it. And in some places, like this for example, maybe this doesn't even exist, because you actually find very weird things like that too, if the country is undeveloped. Because why? They are unable to do it for any reason. Like any reason, the road keeps destroying and they give up, or they can't pass some of the rivers, etc, etc. And if you want to add magic to it, you can do the same. I left this one here on purpose. I was planning to have two roads actually here, like this, but I said like this part would be very nice to have some kind of monster. You can apply them like when adding the roads. So let me see if there is any more to cover. You can also sometimes follow the rivers, but don't forget to leave them, because following a river for tens of kilometers without actually being forced by nature to leave it is really difficult. So what I would also say is sometimes follow rivers. If you notice that it's been a very long road and it's just continuously going, but there is some lakes or rivers around, change the direction a little bit and meet that water resources. Because why? People traveling need water. They need to refill things. So you should either step by some place, some settlements, and refresh it there, or find a natural resource. Therefore, what you could sometimes do is to make sure that the roads, if it's been a long time without any water resource, they should meet with the water resource and leave it. And if you want to go through mountains, then make sure that your road building supports it as well, because generally mountain ranges are what stops people from going still the same, especially if you don't have good technology. So if you want to go through mountains, make sure that part of your world building is really clarified. So make sure you can actually afford that. If your country can do it, it's probably with tunnels. So I would probably put some kind of tunnel symbol, like a cave or a tunnel, and I would just end the road there and start it on the other side of the mountain range. Or if you need to go on top of it and to show for some reason, you could also do it. But for that, just make sure to separate your path from the others, because you will need to use the draw over option here. And maybe you could also do a different color of this one. Maybe you could make it more black. Maybe you could make it also white or gray or some different color, so that it is more readable again. So we understand that this is the where the road is continuing like this. Now I know that this path is the same path and it for some reason goes over the mountain if I can't apply the tunnel idea. Let me know if I missed anything. Make sure to comment them down below so more people can find those informations. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.